You acknowledge that there's been no starvation, correct?
No.
You don't acknowledge that?
I don't acknowledge that.
Where are the videos and images of the starving Gazans?
Well, I've seen a lot, but you would dismiss them all as fakes. My number one problem with this, you can say there's no starvation. I can say there's starvation. The UN says there was starvation, but you guys don't believe a word the UN says. The other official bodies say there was starvation. You don't want to hear a word they say. Israel denies everything. And in the end, the biggest problem is that Israel will not allow, to this day, international journalists into Gaza to do their jobs. And I keep asking, why is that? Because you and I can...
Well, because they're virtually all activists, not journalists.
No, I don't mean Palestinian journalists. I mean international journalists.
No.
If you believe democracy survives on truth, not propaganda dressed up as patriotism, hit that subscribe button. We're building the strongest community for accountability online, and we need your voice in it. Piers Morgan didn't just challenge Dave Rubin on live television. He dismantled him, publicly, methodically, and the fallout is still unfolding. This wasn't your typical cable news shoutfest. This was rarer. A moment when the script broke, when talking points hit a wall, and the propaganda machinery had to run in reverse, on camera, in real time. And here's what makes it fascinating. Piers Morgan, the man who spent months defending Israel's war like it was his personal mission, was the one who finally said, "Wait, something's not adding up here." That should tell you everything. Dave Rubin walked in expecting another friendly platform, a place to recite the usual lines. Israel is defending itself. The UN is lying. Hamas is the problem. You know the script. But what he got instead was something he wasn't prepared for: accountability. And watching someone who's built a career out of deflection suddenly have nowhere left to go, that's not just drama. That's a reckoning. Stick with me, because what happened here isn't just two people disagreeing. It's what happens when propaganda meets reality. And reality doesn't blink first. Drop your city in the comments, and if you're not subscribed, now's the time. Let's get to work.
You acknowledge that there's been no starvation, correct?
No.
You don't acknowledge that?
I don't acknowledge that.
Where are the videos and images of the starving Gazans?
Well, I've seen a lot, but you would dismiss them all as fakes. My number one problem with this, you can say there's no starvation. I can say there's starvation. The UN says there was starvation, but you guys don't believe a word the UN says. The other official bodies say there was starvation. You don't want to hear a word they say. Israel denies everything. And in the end, the biggest problem is that Israel will not allow, to this day, international journalists into Gaza to do their jobs. And I keep asking, why is that? Because you and I can...
Well, because they're virtually all activists, not journalists.
No, I don't mean Palestinian journalists. I mean international journalists.
No.
I mean, the international...
So let in
Reuters, let in AP, let in the BBC, let in Sky, let in
it's also
NBC,
a war zone.
let in
it's
ABC.
A war zone.
Yeah, but they operate in war zones all over the world.
But so when this all ended a few weeks ago, when Trump does this thing, where are all the thousands of starving people? I mean, we're seeing videos of restaurants that are...
Let the journalists in to do their job.
But I mean, right now, where are they? These people have phones.
How do you know?
Live stream. What do you mean?
Do you see where they are?
Of course, there are plenty of videos.
Can't.
What do you mean? There are plenty of videos.
The media are not allowed to do their jobs, Dave.
No.
And I have a big problem as a former editor of a national newspaper.
But the Gazans have phones, and they're showing videos of...
You can say that no Gazan has starved at all. That's entirely your prerogative.
Yeah.
The reports by almost every official body say the opposite, but you don't believe them. However, the best way to get to the truth is let journalists who are used to covering in war zones, let them go in and do their job, particularly now we have the ceasefire. So let them go in. There is a reason the Israeli government is not letting the media in. And I fear I know what it is. They are terrified about what the world will uncover.
I just think that's just...
Well, let them in.
I just think...
There's one way to find out.
A lot of them look fat. They have fresh clothes and fresh haircuts.
I've seen lots of images of Palestinians looking hungry.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't dispute that 20,000 plus children have died, right?
So whose fault is that? You keep saying proportionate. That's the word that has bothered me with this.
I do believe the 3-month blockade earlier this year was a criminal blockade. I believe it was deliberate starvation of a people, deliberately denying them food and aid.
Has any other country in the history of the world been told to feed the people that are killing it?
If you look at the Geneva Convention, actually, but then no other country in the world had the control that Israel has over Gaza, right? Well, which again is a whole separate issue. I steadfastly supported Israel's right to defend itself, and I still do. However, I kept asking from early on, what would be a proportionate response?
But who has ever been asked to have a proportionate response?
Well, let me ask you.
So they should have murdered 1,000 people and raped women.
Let me throw it back at you. Yeah. In the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, 75 years or so, There has never been a response from either side to an atrocity by the other. There's never been a response, anything on this scale. Show me another moment in the 75-year conflict where the response has been to kill 60 times as many people. And where you have well, hang on, let me finish. Where you have a government with people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir who begin publicly, openly talking about ethnically cleansing all the Palestinians from Gaza, about annexing the West Bank, about taking complete control of all of it, to the point that Donald Trump had to step in and say that is not happening, and credit to him for doing that.
Sure,
so
but random ministers
they're
talking,
not random ministers.
about,
they're not
but
the
they
most senior people in the government.
No, but them talking about things is different. I mean,
I hear that a lot. Well, my point is this. You have a unique population in Gaza where half of them are under 18. There is a unique proportion of kids in this part of the world, right? So at what point do you try and find a different way to resolve this? It turned out that Donald Trump found a different way to do it, right? Donald Trump did not agree with Israel continuing to just level Gaza to the floor. He did not agree with Ben-Gvir and Smodrich saying kick all the Palestinians out. Actually, he wants to rebuild Gaza now and make it a prosperous place for Gazans to live, right? But he also wants a two-state solution, which I don't think Netanyahu wants in a million years, right?
Well, I don't know that Trump wants a two-state solution.
Well, I think
I think
ultimately if he could achieve it where you can protect the security of Israelis, he would.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way this ever gets resolved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with that.
The
Palestinians already have a state. It's called Jordan. They have a majority Palestinian population. They're ruled over in a actual apartheid by the Hashemite king. But nobody wants to talk about that.
This is how people in Northern Ireland used to talk, right?
Yeah.
On both sides, you'd have implacable positions. We can never do peace with these people. They're terrorists. They'd all the loyalists and the IRA call themselves terrorists for 7 decades, right? And eventually, you had new clear thinking by Bill Clinton, by Tony Blair, by Senator Mitchell, and we managed to get to peace that nobody thought was achievable. If I'm an Israeli, or if I'm a Jew living out of Israel around the world, do they feel safer by what's happened? Or do they feel less safe? I would argue that the conduct and the way that the Israeli government has waged this war, particularly this year, has actually inflamed hatred of the Israeli government, but also, by association, Israel, Israelis, and Jewish people. I don't think it's made them more secure. I think it's made them less secure. So in all wars, Dave, at some point, you have to have a political solution. The only solution that seemed to be being offered by Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smodrich, and the others was to raise Gaza to the floor and to expel all Palestinians. So, thankfully, Donald Trump sees it a different way. And I thank God that he does, because this had to end.
I think you're having a disconnect between what Bibi and Trump think. I think they're completely aligned on this.
Netanyahu would annex West Bank tomorrow.
He's been in power for 20-something years. He could have done it at any point. Notice he hasn't. I mean,
come on.
But he hasn't.
But it's like the argument, we haven't dropped an atomic bomb on Gaza, therefore, obviously,
if they wanted
fair and love and war, right?
No, but there's a couple things here. I mean, first off, I don't think any country in the world has ever been asked to feed the people that are holding its hostage, right? Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever called for any other country to do that, or anyone?
Well, okay,
has anyone ever called for that?
Well, British prisoners of war in World War II were fed.
Yeah. But
what's the difference?
What?
Prisoners of war in World War II were fed, so what's the difference?
Because they were holding hostages. They're holding their people. I mean, to me, it seems that you as a British citizen...
people being held hostage in
But
Nazi
you as a British citizen, if French terrorists came in and killed what the equivalent would be many more than 1,200, and they took your wife and killed your daughter, would you be calling for a proportionate response?
No, but then
would you say, whatever you have to do to get my wife back?
You should never ask what somebody who's just lost their family would do in that situation. Obviously, they're going to be speaking from a totally different.
Well, I'm asking you hypothetically, if they literally took your wife.
Yes, but I don't think it matters what I think is the grieving father or husband of people who've just been slaughtered. Governments should be above that. They have to take a decision which takes everything into account. And the question I come back to is, do you believe that Israel is now a safer or less safe place for Israelis and Jews than it was before?
Way safer.
For every mass terrorist has been killed, they reckon they've been replaced 5 times with people with the same ideology. The Israeli government, which is a hard-right government, Smodrich and Ben-Gvir are not just right-wing, they're absolute far-right headbangers.
But meaning what? Meaning what? They have to
Meaning what? They want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. Come on, Dave, they do.
They're in the government and they haven't taken an extra inch of the West Bank. They're not.
Well, actually, that's not true.
They haven't.
They've been expanding settlements left, right, and centre.
They haven't.
Yes, they have.
Piers,
you know they have.
Piers, have you been to the West Bank?
You don't think there have been any expansion of settlements on the West Bank?
They build apartments. In current places.
Has there been an aggressive expansion of settlements in the West Bank in this war?
An aggressive expansion of
settlements in the West Bank during this war?
No, 100% not.
Dave, there has been. Okay, so here's the problem.
Have you been there?
So here's the problem.
Have you been there? I know people will love that on the internet.
You say none of this has happened. Yeah. You see everything to the prism of, there's nothing to see here, Gov.
No.
Israel has done no wrong.
No.
Have they done any wrong?
I don't know how to conduct a war exactly,
but
I know that if
it's all my question. Yeah. Has the Israeli government done anything wrong in the way they prosecuted this war?
Not that I know of.
So that's the thing.
So they are desperately trying to.
Okay, so you have a position.
In an existential war, you do what you have to do for your people. Okay. As I think is exactly what you would demand of your government.
Well, except that when my government went to war in Iraq, for example, I led the campaign against it. I was proven right. I think it's more complicated.
But that's a war across the world where there were no British people being hidden under the ground.
This war didn't start on October the 7th. This is a conflict that's been going on for 7 decades. That's why I compare it, actually, to the war that was conducted between, say, the IRA and the British government.
Well, your government did 75 years ago offer the Palestinians a state for the first time because, as you know, the Palestinians never had a state. It was the British mandate.
I think the whole way it was organized at the start was deeply flawed.
When they say a settlement, that means someone built an apartment.
You can sit there and deny all of these things, to which I simply say, let the journalists in, let's find out.
But these people have phones. You know these people have phones, right?
Yes, but I've seen loads of footage which contradicts what you're saying. You wouldn't believe the footage.
What I see are hordes of young men with perfectly cut hair who are in shape with clothes that fit. I mean,
you don't honestly think that life for a young Palestinian kid in Gaza in the last 2 years has been anything but utter hell?
Dave Rubin walked into that interview thinking he'd run the usual playbook: deny, deflect, gaslight, and smirk his way through anything that contradicts the narrative. What he didn't expect was pushback, real pushback, from Piers Morgan of all people. The same Piers Morgan who spent months yelling October 7th at anyone who dares question Israel's conduct. The same guy who practically trademarked defensive outrage as a career move. And yet even he couldn't stomach what Rubin was selling. The moment Rubin claimed there was no starvation in Gaza, you could practically see Piers's brain short-circuit. Because how do you defend that? Pause. How do you keep the facade up when the entire world watched famine unfold in real time? The videos, the skeletal children, the parents digging through flour like it's gold dust, all of it, documented, verified, impossible to ignore. And yet Rubin, with a straight face, insisted none of it happened. According to him, every humanitarian organization, every aid group, every UN body, every independent monitor, all of them were lying, colluding, conspiring, all to frame Israel. It was surreal, watching someone stare into an abyss of evidence and respond with, "But where are the starving people?" Piers actually admitted he'd seen starving Gazans with his own eyes. And even that didn't move Rubin. He just kept scrambling backward, like someone whose teleprompter suddenly went blank. And the excuse he landed on? Honestly embarrassing. "They look fine," he said. "They have fresh clothes." As if having clean fabric means you're not starving. As if famine only counts when you can see ribs popping through skin on live TV. As if suffering needs to meet some Hollywood standard before it qualifies as real. That's not analysis, that's denial with a media kit. As if Palestinians need to audition for the role of starving victim before their suffering counts. The mental gymnastics would be impressive if they weren't so grotesque. But Rubin wasn't done. He pivoted to another line. "No country has ever been told to feed people holding it hostage." That would have been a clean talking point. If Piers Morgan hadn't instantly snapped back with, "British prisoners of war in World War II were fed." Rubin had no answer. He just stared, stumbled, mumbled, then zagged into another rant that made even less sense than the first. Piers pressed further, bringing up the blockade, the starvation reports, the international alarms. And Rubin's response? Pretend they don't count. Anything that contradicts the narrative is automatically fake. Activists, he called them. Even though Piers was clearly talking about internationally recognized journalists. When corrected, Rubin switched scripts. "It's a war zone, we're protecting them." Except Israel claims there's a ceasefire. So how is it still too dangerous for journalists to enter? He couldn't answer that either. And then came the moment that felt less like a debate, and more like watching someone malfunction in real time. Piers asked about the 20,000-plus dead children. Children, innocent. Blown apart, buried under rubble, starved, suffocated, burned alive. Rubin's face didn't change. No sympathy, no discomfort, no hesitation. Just a hollow stare, and then another deflection. Because acknowledging dead children doesn't fit the Israel can do no wrong doctrine he's tattooed onto his soul. And watching that, it didn't feel political. It felt inhuman. When Piers pushed him on proportionality, the same phrase Piers himself made famous early in the war, Rubin's answer got even worse. He tried framing the entire devastation as an unavoidable response, as if flattening entire cities, wiping out families, and displacing millions was just standard procedure. Piers, to his credit, said what should have been said months ago. In the 75-year history of this conflict, there has never been a retaliation anywhere near this scale. Never, not even close. And Rubin still couldn't accept even a fraction of that truth. He kept clinging to talking points, like a drowning man holding a script instead of a life vest. His claim that Palestinians already have a state, Jordan, was propaganda laziness at its finest. It's a line straight from the archives of bot accounts with anime profile pictures, historically false, morally insulting, politically absurd. Piers dismissed it instantly, because even he knows you can't rewrite geography and history on the fly. But the cracks in Rubin's facade really widened when the conversation turned to the Israeli government itself. Piers openly admitted that the current leadership, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir and the rest, are extreme far-right ideologues who have talked quite openly about ethnically cleansing the Palestinian population. This wasn't fringe rumor. These men said it publicly, multiple times, on camera, in writing to foreign governments. Piers brought that up, and Rubin responded with the most robotic line imaginable. They haven't done it. As if the settlements haven't expanded. As if entire Palestinian communities haven't been wiped off the map. As if the West Bank hasn't been carved apart by settlers who literally walk around with assault rifles, escorted by soldiers. That's not a defense. That's a script reading itself into irrelevance. When Piers pointed out the settlement expansions, Rubin simply denied it, straight-up denial. Even when the evidence is on satellite images, documented by Israel's own human rights groups, monitored by international observers, criticized by allied governments, publicly condemned by organizations that historically defend Israel. Rubin still said, "No, that hasn't happened." And Piers finally snapped. "You say none of this has happened. You see everything as nothing to see here. Israel has done no wrong." Rubin's only response? Not that I know of. The most convenient ignorance imaginable. But what really revealed Rubin's moral vacuum was when Piers asked him directly, "Has Israel done anything wrong in the way it conducted this war? Anything? Even one thing?" And Rubin said, "No, not a single mistake, not a single excess, not a single wrongful act." According to him, reducing an entire population to dust is perfectly fine because it's an existential war. That phrase has become the universal cheat code for excusing atrocities, the magic shield Rubin uses to avoid responsibility, empathy, or basic human decency. Then he played his last card, emotional manipulation. He asked Piers what he would want if it were his wife or daughter harmed. It was so transparent it was almost insulting, and Piers shut it down instantly, because grief doesn't justify genocide. And governments are supposed to rise above the rage of wounded families, not channel it into mass slaughter. Rubin didn't like that answer. He tried circling back again and again, but the loop was already exposed. It was propaganda, not conversation. Here's the most ironic part. Even Piers Morgan, someone who spent the beginning of the war echoing Israeli talking points like a broken loudspeaker, reached a point where he could no longer defend what was happening. And the shocking thing, it wasn't because Piers suddenly became pro-Palestine. He didn't, he made that clear. He simply reached the threshold where human decency overpowered political loyalty. Rubin hasn't reached that threshold. Watching him cling to denial while the world sees what has happened in Gaza was genuinely unsettling. By the end, Rubin looked exhausted, frustrated, and exposed. Every attempt he made to rewrite reality fell apart. Every deflection hit a wall. Every lie was met with something he didn't expect: pushback. Piers Morgan, of all people, ended up being the one who held him accountable, and Rubin couldn't handle it. He stuttered, snapped, denied, dodged, repeated himself until the entire performance collapsed into something almost painful to watch. His job was to sell a narrative, but nobody was buying. And that's the real story here. Not the debate, not the talking points, but the fact that the propaganda machine is breaking down in real time because it simply cannot keep up with the truth on the ground. Even its loudest, most loyal mouthpieces are slipping, and all the scripted lines in the world can't hide what millions have seen with their own eyes. Dave Rubin walked into that interview trying to defend the indefensible. He walked out exposed, not just as a propagandist, but as someone so devoid of empathy he couldn't acknowledge the suffering of even one Palestinian child. And in a world where everything is finally on camera, where the victims documented their own destruction, where lies fall apart instantly, that level of denial isn't just embarrassing, it's obscene.